welcome to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer. My guest today is Sara Staggs. Sara was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. She practiced civil rights litigation for several years before turning to writing. Her debut novel, Uncontrollable, is based on her experiences with epilepsy and has been called a compelling story that tackles complex themes with sensitivity and nuance by Pacific Book Review, and it is also a five-star reader's favorite. She loves to write fiction, both adult, contemporary, and YA. Sara is an epilepsy advocate and an LGBTQ plus advocate. She writes a blog that covers both. She has appeared on television and podcasts to talk about epilepsy, and she works to dispel the stigma that surrounds the condition. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and when she's not writing, she can be found reading, hiking, mountain biking, or camping with her husband and two children. Her book, Uncontrollable, is an inspirational story of a woman whose life is derailed by something out of her control and how she chooses to face life on its terms, abandoning what she once dreamed she could be. Sara, I'm so glad that you were able to join me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Doing great. Your story, it's so full of heart. And your protagonist, Casey, she's a mom, she's a legal rock star, but her brain has become her enemy. Your blog suggests that you write what you know. So how has epilepsy affected your life?
So I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was about 18 months old, but it didn't really affect me during childhood or teen years. It just sort of came back in my 20s, and it was pretty manageable throughout my 20s and early 30s. But once I had my second pregnancy, I was still practicing. I was a civil rights litigator, and the doctors all said, "You have to stop practicing. It's too stressful for you and for the baby." I was having a lot of seizures in my second pregnancy. So it's sort of like I walked into a doctor's appointment, a practicing attorney, and I walked out knowing I had to close my practice. And
Wow.
so I really had to find what my next step was going to be. And I found it in writing. I've had two brain surgeries, and I just sort of started writing to release the trauma from the surgeries and being in the hospital beforehand. And it just came into being a novel.
Is that something that you did on your own, or was it suggested to you? Writing,
Which part?
the
The
writing.
writing?
Yeah.
No, I did it on my own. I kept journals in the hospital both times that I was in there. And so I would come home, and then just to get all the negative feelings out, I would type out what I'd written. And then I sort of looked at it and said, well, maybe if I knit this together with the fictional backstory, it could be a novel. And I started writing.
Yeah. And sometimes life events will, it's not that you're, and we'll talk about how you feel about this, but sometimes it's not necessarily that you're giving everything up. It's just that you have to refocus and rethink yourself. This is what I got out of your book. Um, did your character and you cope with this the same way, or were you different?
I think that Casey is a much more aggressive person than I am. She's very used to, for your readers, it's told from the point of view of Casey and then her husband, Jonah. So you get the dual point of view throughout the novel. But Casey is very used to getting her own way and just being able to barrel through whatever may come. So there, I we're not that similar in that she's so much more aggressive than I am, but we are similar in that, all of a sudden I came to a T and had to figure out what would be my next step. What was I going to do next? And it couldn't be litigating what I had been trained to do.
Yeah. Both your characters, Casey and Jonah, had to deal with a lot, and their marriage suffered. What do you think led to the communications breakdown?
I think that they started not communicating well with each other, and it just sort of snowballed into really trying to figure out, Casey wants what she wants. Jonah kind of wants what he wants, but he doesn't want to hurt her feelings. So I just wrote them as, they're flawed people, right? It's a flawed relationship, but we all have that. And so I'm hoping that they'll be relatable to the readers, and that maybe some readers can see what a relationship and a marriage is honestly like.
Yeah. I found them to be very relatable. I actually deal with chronic illness, and my husband and I were at odds with each other at some point. Your book is something that I would kind of like him to read. We're great now, but there was a
Yeah.
bumpy period where he wanted me to just stop everything and be healthy. And I didn't want, I looked at that as giving up on life. So, I really related to your character. I I'm more that kind of aggressive. No, I'm not going to quit. Just no. So
Yeah.
it was really an interesting study. Um, why do you think Casey doesn't make it a priority to take care of herself?
I think because she's so driven in her profession that she just puts her health second because she doesn't want to deal with it. She
Okay.
doesn't want any limitations. She just wants to be able to go on and be this, you know, country renowned, world renowned civil rights litigator. And so she doesn't want to recognize that there are any limitations to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you weren't as aggressive about that as her, but you did leave a big career for a quieter life. So how did you handle the transition?
Yeah, I didn't handle it well.
Okay.
It was not easy for me because I'd gone to law school, graduated, established myself in this career, and was starting to really be an up and coming litigator. And then all of a sudden, that wasn't available to me anymore. And I really wanted it. I saw my whole life as just, I'm just going to be a litigator, and
Yeah.
that's it, And then all of a sudden, I'm told by my doctors, no, that's not it. And I did not handle that well. I think there's a big mental health component that's also addressed in the book.
There is definitely. I some of the stuff that I was reading, I thought, okay, you know this, and needed to be reminded. So for me, it wasn't just a work of fiction. It was kind of like you need to refocus too. You need to look at this. What kind of trouble is going on that is so unnecessary if you would just work with life, you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
Casey's doctors made just sort of a matter of fact diagnosis with basically was a death sentence. So what would you say to somebody who is in a similar situation? Like how do you go on with your life that way?
Well, I think that I would recommend that the person, listen to the doctor. Doctors aren't always good communicators. They don't always take care with their words. So in the book, Casey has different interactions with different sorts of doctors. Some are better than others. But the one who basically tells her you need to deal with this, or you're not going to live, uh, he delivers it in a very matter of fact way, which is unfortunate because it's a very big statement. And I think that if anyone had some sort of statement made like that, then work with it, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the smartest things that my doctor did, it was a completely different situation, but he recognized in me that kind of, well, so what, and then he sent
Yeah.
me to, of all things, he sent me to a therapist. And I walked in with my giant chip on my shoulder and I said, so, kind of cancer have you had? What kind of insight do you have for me?
Mhm.
And he said, are we angry?
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
And he gave me a lot of things to do, all of which were very helpful in refocusing, because it's a type of energy that can be harnessed if you're, reasonable about it. But if you just want to be mad, that's not helpful at all.
Right.
So taking a step out of the story world for a minute and going to the real world, what would you talk about seizures, what they are, and can you tell readers and listeners who don't know about this what to do to be helpful if somebody is having a seizure?
Sure. So there are about 40 different kinds of seizures, but basically, your brain always has electrical activity going on. That's what helps you move. All the neurons and neural pathways are always communicating at random. A seizure happens when neural pathways in a certain part of the brain or in the entire brain fire off at once. And that's when someone will have a seizure. And so what people should do to help someone who's having what's called a tonic clonic seizure, which is the ones that people really think of, where you fall to the ground and lose consciousness. So there's seizure first aid is the three S's: stay, safe, and side. So first of all, stay with the person who is having the seizure throughout the seizure and after their recovery. Second is make sure they're in a safe place. And if you can, put a pillow under their head or something soft. And then third is side. If you can, get them on their side so they don't asphyxiate if something does come up. And then there are things not to do. So, about four things not to do. One, do not put anything in the person's mouth. You cannot swallow your tongue. That is myth. I don't, just don't do it. Two, you do not need to hold them down or shake them. You can't make someone stop having a seizure. The brain just needs to run its course, and um, and then the seizure will end. And three, you don't need to call 911 unless the person is pregnant, they have hurt themselves in a way where you would call 911 anyway, or I think those are basically the two. If you know the person and you know they've never had a seizure before, then you can call 911. And if the seizure stops and another seizure starts again, that is also a medical emergency. But other than that, you don't need to call 911.
Okay. And you do a lot of advocacy, and I see that you've done things around the months. I think it's November is Awareness Month. Yeah. Purple
Yes.
is the color.
Yes, yes. So purple is the color, and November is Epilepsy Awareness Month. And this year I'll be presenting at the Cleveland Clinic Symposium for
Wow.
Epilepsy. So I'm excited to do that and educate doctors on how to treat their patients.
I hope you get somewhere with that, because
I do too.
in epilepsy, yes, and in a lot of things, it has been my experience that the doctor tells you what's what, and then your nurse is your best friend. She's the person who's going, or he is going to be the person who's going to communicate with you best. I don't know if you found the same thing, but
Um, in my early years, in my early 20s, I was pretty passive and not asking a lot of questions and dealing with the nurse most of the time. Now I'm a little more aggressive. I know more, I question more, I message the doctors directly and sort of expect them to
awesome. Good for
message
you.
me back. Yeah, so I think that my the way that I approach my epilepsy has changed a bit.
Well, that's good. And that's another form of advocacy too. And even just as a patient, you're educating the doctors. Hello, you just came in here and gave me something. You're not done.
Right.
We
Yeah,
need to talk.
exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly.
that's really good. Um, do you have any advice for people who are dealing with this or something like this, in terms of how it helps, how it affects the family and what they might do to, seek some help with that?
Yeah, so a chronic condition of any sort really can put a lot of strain on the family. It can put strain on a marriage. There are a lot of feelings that can go along with it, perhaps guilt of your partner having to pick up the slack, or, worries about, oh, well, how is this affecting the children? And so what I would encourage people to do is just it's okay.
Yeah.
If your partner loves you and they do love you, then they're not going to make you feel guilty. And yes, it may be a little more difficult for them, but you didn't ask for your chronic condition, and the children are going to be okay. It'll probably make them more empathetic people.
Hmm.
I always worried, oh my gosh, am I giving my children anxiety? They see me having these seizures, but they know what to do. They're very much more calm about it. So it really, I think, it makes them kinder in a way, and maybe
Yes.
even more resilient because they've had to see a parent with whatever chronic condition that parent struggles with.
Hmm.
So I really think that it's okay, and the person with the chronic illness should, you know, have some self-care and be kind to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my early life, was diagnosed with cancer and didn't realize that it was affecting the kids. What I was trying to do was keep the kids unaware of everything.
Yeah.
So as young adults, they came to me and talked to me about it because it happened again. And I
Okay.
said, and my daughter was the one who instigated it. And she says, we need to sit down and talk because your strategy last time just was not a good one at all. Okay. We do
Right.
know, we're not stupid. We know what's going on. And
Right.
so she wanted to be involved and stuff. And I thought, oh, I don't know, you're a little young for this, but you have to kind of trust them. I think they are your family. There's
Mhm.
they're there and they see what's going on. So I think that's really good advice, is to get them. And I agree with you. Both of my kids are way more empathetic than some of their friends, because their friends have
Yeah.
never experienced loss or
Right.
and been in a scary situation. And so then when
Yeah.
these things happen, their friends fall to pieces. And my kids are like, well, that's not good. What do we do? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they've had a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the most common misunderstandings about epilepsy?
Well, there's this sort of stigma that surrounds it that's just been embedded in society for, centuries. And so it's really hard to undo. Common misconceptions, I would say, maybe people with epilepsy aren't as smart as other people, that you shouldn't talk about it, that it's something to be talked around. People are very hesitant, even, you know, sometimes in my family, before I really started this advocacy, to use the word epilepsy or seizure, but just start to feel comfortable doing that. What else? I mean, there's really just so much, but I think the overall is that you shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
That it's something that people are very uncomfortable, but it's so common. There are 50, I think it's 50 million people, it might be more, 65 worldwide who have epilepsy.
Hmm.
And so it's the fourth most common neurological condition in the United States. And so it's it should be talked about, and it's
Yeah.
okay to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is, sometimes it just happens once and you never have an answer. I've got two family members that have had seizures. No, they don't have no idea why. They
Yeah,
the doctors don't know, they don't know, probably will
yeah,
never happen again. But when you
right,
think about how complex the brain is, your computer
yeah.
flips out every now and then, so why not? You know?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. There's so much that they don't know about the brain, and it's so difficult to find out because someone would have to be the guinea pig, right?
Well, and it has to be happening and you have to be hooked up at the time. So,
Right,
so they
right.
can't really peek inside unless you're already hooked up. So that's interesting. Do you have any advice for caretakers?
For caretakers, also, I would say take some time and make sure that you are taking care of yourself as well. Because if you are not taking care of yourself, then you can't give to the person. You won't be able to. So for caregivers, make sure that you are giving yourself the space and the time that you need to do the things that you enjoy so that you can be there and show up for the person you're giving care to.
Good advice. Is there a work in progress? Do you have something else on the burner?
I do. I'm writing a YA, young adult LGBTQ novel about a trans teen who has to move from Texas when the law passes that outlaws
Oh,
gender affirming medical care.
yeah.
And so they moved to Portland, Oregon with their family, and it's like a whole new lease on life. And so it's
Wow.
exploring how they manage this new high school. They have a love interest and all of that.
So when can we see that? When will that be out?
I'm hoping that it'll come out next fall. I'm gonna start to query it in, I think, January.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that we'll look forward to that. Your writing style is something that I really enjoy, so I'll be looking for that book next.
Thank you.
So, is there a question I have not asked that you wish that I had?
Oh, goodness. That's an unexpected question.
Well, the mic is yours, whatever you want to
Yes.
say.
Um, I think that I didn't realize that after you wrote the novel, there was a whole third part
Oh, that's
to getting it published. The first part is, I guess kind of coming up with the idea, what have you, then you write the novel. And then there's the whole business part and the PR part, and that
yeah,
sort of takes over. I don't think that a lot of authors or readers realize that once the novel is done, that's not it.
yeah,
You get it published, and then you have to promote it, and then you can keep writing. But
yeah,
it definitely, the second or the third part came as a big surprise to me, how much the post writing, you do all the editing and
yeah,
working with the publisher, and then finally the book is ready and comes out.
yeah. How was the process of getting a cover for you? Was it
Getting
fun
a cover.
or scary? With some publishers don't give you any say. I happen to know that yours does.
Yeah, they asked for some ideas, and then David King came up with the cover, and I really liked it. And so, I had a little say in that. I gave them ideas of what my vision was, and then they said, what do you think of this? And I liked it.
Yeah, I've been surprised at the number of genre that they handle. Genres, I guess, is the plural, and
Yeah,
the fact that he does, and or whoever else is working with him, does such a good job across genres. So yeah, he's pretty
yeah.
intuitive about whatever it is. It's almost like he read the book. I really had an idea that he reads these books. So
Well, I would hope so, I suppose, because, or
I
at
th-
least part of them.
somebody does. I'm not sure it's him, but somebody does. So yeah. Anyway. Well, it has been a pleasure, an honor. To listeners, please, as always, look below, and I will put all the links where you can find Sara, her books, her activities, her blog. Definitely, I don't care whether you have epilepsy or not, you should probably take a look at her blog. There's an awful lot of really nice stuff in there that I would highly recommend just everyone
Good.
read. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's three categories that I write about. Writing and publishing, epilepsy, and then transgender parenting.
Yeah,
So
there's something for everybody there. So,
something for everybody.
okay. Well, thank you very much. And please give me a shout when your next book is out and let's have you back.
I will. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.